Today, we're diving into what happens when a pretty normal HOA election goes completely off the rails. It's a story about a legal battle inside an Arizona community that, believe it or not, called the whole idea of a fair vote into question. And it's all about how one homeowner stood up to protect the rights of over 1,000 of his neighbors.
So the whole thing really boils down to this one kind of baffling question. How is it even possible for just 12 people to have the power to overrule almost 1,400 homeowners? It sounds absolutely nuts, right? But for a while, that was the reality inside the Terravita Community Association.
Just look at these numbers. They really paint a picture, don't they? On one side, you've got the entire community, 1,380 homes, and on the other, the tiny handful of people, just 12, needed to elect the entire board of directors. This really shows you the massive power imbalance we're about to get into.
So here's how we're going to unpack all this. We'll start with the numbers game, then explain the very unique voting system they had. We'll meet the homeowner who fought back, dive into the legal showdown, and of course, reveal the judge's final verdict. And stick around, because we'll finish up with why this ruling really matters for pretty much any homeowner out there. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in Scottsdale, Arizona, in a planned community called Terravita. Now, HOAs are super common, right? They're supposed to keep up community standards, protect property values, but the kind of power they have can lead to some, well, let's just say some very unusual situations.
So here's the layout of the community. You've got 1,380 homes in total, but for things like voting, it's all divided up into 22 different neighborhoods. And overseeing the whole shebang is a single board of directors. This structure, right here, is the key to this entire story.
And this, my friends, is where things start to get really weird. To get what this fight was all about, you have to understand the bizarre voting system at the center of it all, a system the HOA called the delegate system.
Okay, so here's how it worked. The homeowners in each of those 22 neighborhoods, they'd elect one person to be their delegate. Then those 22 delegates, and only them, would get together to vote for the community's board. But here's the kicker. Once that delegate was elected, they could vote however they personally wanted. It didn't matter what the homeowners who elected them thought. It effectively silenced them.
And get this wasn't some handshake deal or an unwritten rule. No, it was spelled out right there in the HOA's own governing documents. It literally says the delegate can vote as they see fit in its sole discretion. That one little phrase gave 22 people total power in elections and snatched it right out of the hands of 1,380 homeowners.
Well, after an election went down in May of 2007, one homeowner decided this system wasn't just unfair. He was pretty sure it was illegal. His name was William M. and he decided he was going to take on the whole system himself.
And man, once the ball got rolling, it moved fast. The election was on May 15th. Just 3 days later, Mr. Brown filed his petition. They had a hearing that August, and by the beginning of September, a judge had already issued a final decision that was about to change everything.
Okay, so now we get to the main event, the legal showdown. And it all came down to a fight over two little words, delegate versus proxy. It sounds like boring legal stuff, but this battle of definitions had huge consequences for every single homeowner in that community.
So what in the world is a proxy? Legally, it's just someone who's allowed to act as a substitute for another person, in this case, to cast their vote. And here's why that matters so much. At the time, there was an Arizona state law that straight up banned using proxies in HOA board elections.
So the HOA's argument was basically, hey, our system is a form of governance, not proxy voting. They tried to say it was totally different and even safer from abuse. But Mr. Brown's argument was just simple and direct. A delegate, by definition, is a substitute for the voters. That makes them a proxy, and that means the whole system breaks state law. End of story.
And this is where the HOA's argument gets just, well, unbelievable. Their defense, and I am not making this up, was that because their own documents already took away the members' right to vote for the board, the state law banning proxies just couldn't apply. Think about that. They basically argued, we can't be breaking the law on voting because we already took away our members' right to vote. It's a completely circular argument. So, you're probably wondering, what did the judge make of all this? Well, let's get to the final verdict and see how the court just completely took apart the HOA's delegate system.
The judge's decision? Clean, simple, and totally unambiguous. The delegate voting system was declared illegal.
The judge, Michael K. Carroll, did not mince words. He cut right through all the legal jargon and called the HOA's attempt to separate delegates from proxies a classic distinction without a difference. He saw that it didn't matter what you called the system, what mattered was what it did, and it acted exactly like a banned proxy system.
And he didn't stop there. He actually flipped the HOA's whole argument on its head. He said this delegate system created even more potential for abuse than regular proxies. Why? Because it didn't just transfer votes, it completely cut the community out of the process, concentrating all that power into the hands of just 22 people.
And for a final little cherry on top for the homeowner, the judge ordered the HOA to pay William Brown back his $550 filing fee. It's not a huge amount of money, but symbolically, it was a total victory.
Okay, so you might be thinking, that's a wild story from back in 2007, but why should I care today? Well, the lessons from this ruling are incredibly important for anyone who lives in a community with an HOA.
So let's just quickly run through the big takeaways here. First, substance over labels. It doesn't matter what fancy name your HOA gives a system. It's what it does that counts. Second, state law is king. An HOA can't just make up its own rules if they violate state statutes. Third, this case reinforces that voting rights are fundamental. You can't just sign them away in the fine print. And maybe most importantly, it shows that one person, one homeowner, really can stand up and protect the rights of an entire community.
You know, this whole case was about a system that was just hiding in plain sight, written right into the community's own rules. It really makes you stop and think, do you actually know how your own HOA really votes?